Hi everyone, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And check the lines out on the whip that we've got this week. I think that the Lexus NX is one of the best looking little crossovers out there. This vehicle's been in the company's line since 2015 and it's based on the same platform as the Toyota RAV4 and the Lexus CT200H, that smaller hatchback hybrid in the company's lineup as well. And since it was introduced, it's become Lexus's second best-selling vehicle here in Canada, just behind the RX, which is a slightly larger crossover in the company's lineup. Now, the target demographic for the NX is younger urban professionals, people who perhaps don't quite have families yet, and that's my big question for the NX this week. Is it going to be enough car for family living? So we're going to throw some ski gear into this thing, go off on a bit of a ski trip. As well, we'll put all of our standardized tests through this vehicle too, car seats and all the rest, and see if in fact the NX can stack up for family living. That's all this week here on Family Wheels. Well, NX stands for Nimble Crossover, and I do love how car companies are kind of taking a little bit more of a playful approach with these small crossovers. They are geared at a slightly younger buyer after all, and it means that when you look at the NX, it kind of has a bit of a style cue from the Lexus LFA, which is a very super expensive high-end sports car. Even in this orange color, which has been kind of split this week depending on who you ask. I quite like it. I think the NX can pull it off quite nicely. It kind of has a playful attitude about it. And nimble crossover is certainly what I feel like when I get behind the wheel of this as well. The NX has been really nicely tuned, particularly when it comes to its suspension. This is a very nice ride, and in fact, when I'm driving it around, taking it through corners at some decent speeds here this week, it doesn't feel like a crossover with decent ground clearance at all. It feels like much more of a sports car. Now, a big part of that this week is because our tester includes the Series 3 F Sport package. That's the highest level of the F Sport package that you can get in the NX, and it has some pretty sweet kit on board, including constantly adaptive suspension, both in the front and rear. So as the vehicle's driving along, it's sensing the road, sensing how you're driving, sensing the corners, and adjusting as need be. The result is that I constantly feel connected to the road. The downside to that F Sport package is that it's very expensive. I found this in the RX that we were testing a couple of months ago as well on the program. The base price on this vehicle starts out at $42,000, but here I am today with the F Sport package, which costs an extra 12 grand, and I'm at over $55,000 at this point. So it's kind of a question of what's important to you. Standard equipment on the NX is decent, including these faux leather Nulux seats, which we're going to get to in a little bit more detail in a bit. We've got a rear backup camera, Bluetooth connectivity, all-wheel drive comes standard, heated front seats, LED headlamps, LED tail lights, that sort of thing. But if you do want to get into some of the higher level safety features or some of these more geeky performance features like that adaptive suspension or paddle shifters here on the steering wheel so you can play around in the corners. We even have a G-force reader here in this tester. That's when you have to get into these higher level trims. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you are looking for some of these more advanced safety features like lane keeping assist technology, adaptive cruise control, forward automatic braking, that sort of thing, this suite of safety features, which is becoming a lot more mainstream, even in lower level vehicles than the NX, Lexus is considering putting that in standard in all 2018 models of this vehicle. So if it's not an imminent purchase for you, that may be something to look for in the coming year. Now, speaking of safety, the NX has a pretty good track record on that front. When it was first released in 2015, it got a top Safety Pick Plus rating from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. So while it's not necessarily a huge crossover vehicle, it's one that you'll feel safe driving your family around it. So the NX comes with two power plant possibilities. First up is the 200T, which is what we're driving around here this week. It's a 4-cylinder, 2-liter turbocharged engine. Next up, you have the 300H, and that gives you the same 2.5-liter gasoline engine as well as an electric engine, that same hybrid combination that you find in the Toyota Camry hybrid. So don't expect that to be much of a performer, but your fuel efficiency will be slightly better, although not as good as I expected it to be in a vehicle of this size with a hybrid power plant on board. Meanwhile, here in the 200T, this 4-cylinder turbo is a winning combination, and a lot of companies are doing this right now, turning to smaller 4-cylinders that give you the performance out of the turbo when you need it, but slightly better fuel efficiency as well. So we've tested the Mercedes GLA with a 2-liter turbo, we've tested the Audi Q5 with a 2-liter turbo, the Subaru Forester has the same kind of setup that we tested a couple of months ago, even the Kia Sportage that we tested this last summer has it. I like that combination. The one downside is that if you try and floor it off the line, you're going to get a bit of turbo lag. Lexus says that they've found a way around that the turbo lag isn't going to be quite as apparent here in the NX, but I gotta be honest, it's still there, perhaps not as much as we saw in that Forester. However, when it comes to day-to-day driving, chances are you're not going to be trying to street race the NX against someone when you get to a stoplight. In every other scenario, this car feels like it's got the power, it corners beautifully, it goes up hills beautifully, and it's a very eager little car that still manages to get about 10 liters per 100 kilometers this week, according to our fuel efficiency ratings. That's on a mixture of highway and city roads, by the way. Now, while we're talking about the competition, I've already talked about how much I like the looks of this car. A lot better than the competition. The BMW X1, the Audi Q3, the Acura RDX, they all kind of look bland and boring when you put it compared to this vehicle. The outside, anyway. But once you step on board this vehicle, and I found the same with the RX that we tested earlier this year, Lexus just isn't making the same bold style statement here inside as they are on the outside. We've got this old school analog clock here, a very busy center console. If we look at this compared to, say, the Volvo XC90, even the XC60, which is the smaller crossover from the Volvo line, it's a very sleek interior, not much in terms of buttons, and it really cleans things up. I'm finding that when I'm driving along here, there are times where my eyes are off the road for far longer than they should be, just because I can't find what I'm looking for. If you gave me everything on a touch screen, rather than using this old school trackpad, which feels like something out of an early 2000s era vehicle for the infotainment system, you could include a lot of this information, a lot of these buttons right onto the touchscreen and clean things up a lot. A couple of other things about the interior that I think sort of fall middle of the pack. First up, seat comfort. Not as comfortable as the Mercedes GLA or the Audi Q5, but I think the Acura RDX didn't have seats as nice as this. And then noise in terms of the interior noise for the cabin isn't terrible, but not great either. I'm reaching 65 decibels here this week at 100 kilometers an hour. We do have winter tires on board, but even still, that seems a little bit noisy for a more luxury crossover vehicle. Things that I really like about the NX include just general build quality. You feel like you're in a nicely made car. A lot of soft touch surfaces here on the interior. There's a lot of nice little attention to detail as well. And when you look at this vehicle just in terms of general reliability, well, Lexus has always been top of the pack in that respect, and they continue to be for 2016. They just won the top spot from Consumer Reports in terms of reliability. Well, surprise, surprise, the second row in the NX is certainly not the most spacious that I've ever sat in, but it's also a lot actually roomier than I thought it might be. For a small crossover, I'm pleasantly surprised. I've got a little bit of extra headroom. I'm 6'2", and I've even got a little bit of extra legroom too. Now, one thing that annoys me that I'm seeing in a lot of higher end vehicles these days is that the driver's seat, when the ignition gets turned off, comes sliding back, which gives the driver better access in and out of the vehicle. But if you're a tall person sitting back here, you're gonna get pinned in, and I find that rather annoying. Another thing that I was disappointed not to see here in the second row with heated second row seats. It's not even an option that's available to you. Neither is a panorama sunroof. Now, it's just got this small sunroof here in the NX. It means that the second row feels a little bit cave-like. However, seat comfort back here is really excellent. These are super comfortable seats, and they're covered with this new Lux product that Toyota's putting in a lot of its vehicles. It's a faux leather product that's very convincing, but it's also very durable, and it's a more green product to produce as well. It doesn't take nearly as much in terms of materials or have as much of a carbon footprint as traditional leather does. I was disappointed though, and we've talked about this so many times, to see that the second row does have these perforations in it. They're tough to, get all those little grooves cleaned out if something spills, and why put it in the second row and run that risk with kids spilling stuff back here so much? That's just a bit of a personal vendetta of mine. Now, the trunk is where this vehicle is going to suffer for you. If you're a family and you've got a lot of things to haul around, its capacity is just 500 liters. That's pretty tiny. And then when you go for the hybrid version of this vehicle, it gets even smaller. Now you can see here the result is, for our standardized trunk test, a stroller, a diaper bag, a couple of bags of groceries, a backpack, and a soccer ball. You're not fitting much else in there. In fact, it's going to be tight even for your family dog. To put this into perspective, the Honda Fit that we were testing a couple of years ago on the program has a trunk capacity of 470 liters, so just a tiny bit smaller than this. And that Acura MDX that we were in a couple of weeks ago now has a trunk capacity of 1,230 liters, so well over twice as much trunk capacity as what we see here. That's obviously a much larger vehicle. It's such a short vehicle that when we did have our skis in here earlier this week, I actually had to put them between the armrest, between the front two passengers there. It's not great for cargo capacity, and one thing that also is annoying here is that a lot of the competitors have a quick release function somewhere around here where that second row seat will flip down to give you some extra cargo capacity. Here on the NX, you have to walk around and use this handle right here like I did a moment ago. Now you can see I've put our rear-facing car seat in place. Roger's front-facing now, but I've flipped it around to see what that would do for front passenger comfort. Once your kids are front-facing, it's actually pretty roomy back there, but rear-facing, it's a bit of a squeeze. You can see we've got our measuring tape in place here. We've got about 9 inches of legroom according to that, and that's going to be a squeeze. I've got pretty tight headroom, and my legroom's maxed out too. I'm right up against the glove box. Well, if you're on the hunt for a smaller crossover that is relatively fun to drive, has some very bold exterior lines on it, is pretty safe as well, and has that Japanese build quality, this reliability that Lexus is famous for, I think the NX is really a no-brainer and certainly worth a look. Younger couples that don't quite have kids of their own yet, it's going to be fine. But if you are a family, if you've got kids kicking around, even if you're a grandparent, you're an empty nester, and you perhaps have your grandkids hopping into this thing from time to time, you're going to feel the squeeze. It's going to be even tight for the pooch there in the trunk, and it means that I don't think the NX is quite going to cut it for day-to-day living with kids on the scene, unless it's a secondary vehicle. If you're looking for something that's a bit smaller, maybe a bit more fuel efficient than a great big SUV or minivan, this could be a great choice for you. But heading out to the mountains for the weekend, heading off to the cottage, this also isn't going to tow much. It has a maximum towing capacity of 2,000 pounds. I think you're going to feel fairly painted in with the NX for daily family living. Although I will say I've gotten rather fond of the NX here this week. It kind of reminds me of a little Jack Russell Terrier. It's bold and fun, and it's got a little package, and it just wants to do circles around you all day long. It's a cool car, and that's why I say go orange, be bold with the NX, make a statement, and that's why I'm disappointed by this interior. But I've said that enough. I've made my point. I'd like to know what your thoughts are here on the NX. What do you think? How does it stack up to the competition? What do you like about it? What don't you like? You can leave a comment below. Please subscribe while you're at it, and then head over to familywheels.ca for our bullet point review on this car. List of things that we like, things we're not so crazy about as well. Next week on the program, we are in the Toyota Prius V. The Prius has been redesigned for 2016. We already tested that vehicle out, but how does its wagon version stack up? We're going to check that out next week on the program. Hope to see you then, and have a great week.